Welcome back to another episode of the All Yellow Jackets podcast. I'm your host, Jackson Caldwell, publisher of AllYellowJackets.com. I appreciate you being with me today. It's Thursday. It's preview day. Everybody that listens to the pod knows this. Everybody that follows along. Thursday is the big day. We previewed the game on Saturday. Last week, we didn't have a preview pod. We just kind of dove into everything, kind of a mid-season look at the team and the second half of the season. But now it's time to start that second half of the season, and it's a very important second half, as we talked about last week. And it's a big game this weekend. I know not a lot of national attention is going to be on this game, but this is huge for both teams. And we're going to dig into that a little bit. But as always, to start the show off, if you're watching the show on YouTube, would love a like on the video, subscribe to the channel. If you're new here, hit that notification bell so you know when new content is up. I try to do a couple shows a week, but just make sure you hit that notification bell to know whenever anything goes up. If you're listening on podcast, be sure to give a 1-star review, 3-star review, 5-star review. It doesn't matter. I want to know what y'all think of the show. I want to know what I can improve upon, because this is content for Yellow Jackets fans. I want to know what they think about it and the ways I can make it better for you guys. So love all the feedback. So let's get into it. After a bye week, it's been a strange 2 to 3 weeks for this football program. Just a couple of weeks ago, it was doom and gloom after the loss to Bowling Green. There was how many more games we're going to win this year? Bowl games off the table now, like that's a disaster. And then in one of the craziest college football endings ever, Tech may have flipped their fortunes in their for their season just by beating Miami in the fashion that they did. Now they're sitting at 3-3. Bowl game hopes have been renewed. Still a ways to work on that, but they've been renewed. And now they get back-to-back home games to finish out the month of October, and the first opponent is going to be Boston College, who is also 3-3. It's kind of been a funky season for them too. They started off really, really bad. They lost to a bad Northern Illinois team. That's something that Boston College and Georgia Tech have in common. They both lost to a bad MAC team this year, as neither Bowling Green or Northern Illinois are any good. And then they followed it up with they beat Holy Cross, but it was basically a loss because they beat Holy Cross by 3 points. You cannot beat a bad FCS team by 3 points and just, But their highlight of the season actually was in a loss against Florida State. They were this close to pulling out a big upset. That was kind of the coming out party for their new quarterback, Thomas Castellanos. He did not start the season against NIU, but he has taken over and he has done really well in his role there, especially as a runner. And we're going to dig into more of that in just a second. But then they played Louisville and got absolutely smoked. I think the score was 56-28. They were sitting at 1-3. They have followed it up with back-to-back really close wins against Virginia and Army. They got down early against Virginia, had to come back and win that game. They really had to battle to beat Army last week, and Army's not very good. So it's hard to get a read on. Like, on one hand, I think Boston College is figuring some things out on offense. They're running the ball very well, especially with Castellanos. Their defense leaves a lot to be desired. And then, on the Tech side of things, you had the loss to Louisville to start the season, the blown second half. They have wins against South Carolina State, Wake Forest, and Miami. The other two losses to Ole Miss and Bowling Green. This is it's a huge game for both teams, just in the senses both these teams want and need. Boston College needs to make a bowl game more than Georgia Tech, just because this is Brent Key's first season, and I don't think anybody's going to look at it and say, all right, he's in trouble if he doesn't make a bowl game this year. Like, Jeff Hafley, the Eagles head coach, he is firmly on the hot seat right now. Like, he is – they need to make a bowl game probably for him to keep his job. I'm not, report anything or anything, but, it's been widely talked about. He is one of the coaches on the hot seat. He's probably really the only ACC coach, I would say, on the hot seat right now. Like, I guess you could make the argument for Dino Babers, but Jeff Hafley and Boston College need this win, and maybe even more so than Georgia Tech. Like, I think you're going to see a very desperate team coming in here this weekend because they have some winnable games on the second half of their schedule. Like Boston College, as far as ACC schedule goes, it's not all that hard. They still have games against Pitt, Virginia Tech, and UConn, so they can still get to a bowl game. But at the same time, like they're only slight underdogs in this game, and there are some matchups I do think that play into the Eagles' advantage here. So I guess with that being said, I guess let's just talk about the matchup in a broad perspective. Let's discuss injury reports first. From what it sounds like, Georgia Tech's going to come into this game pretty healthy. Like Chase Lane was listed on the depth chart this week, and look, you need to take that stuff with a grain of salt. To be honest, I wrote whenever I write those depth chart article write-ups, I always say just it's what they're saying, but just pay attention to what's actually happening on the field more than so than what they're putting out there. Okay, like I feel like Chase Lane is going to be back. He kind of talked about that going in there. He's been available in emergency situations only for the past few games. Plus, you add in the bye week. Like I think getting him back is a real possibility this week. And Jordan Williams was listed as the starter at right tackle, so he appears to be back this week. And look, Ja'Kai Leftwich, he played pretty admirably in place of Williams, but Williams has been. I think he's the third highest graded offensive lineman on PFF this year, behind Joe Fusile and Weston Franklin. Like Williams has been a good player this year, and I think getting him back will help solidify the offensive line. Now, Boston College does not have a good pass rush whatsoever, and their run defense isn't anything to write home about. But just getting a leader back on the offensive line, and I think he'll come back and have an impact right away. But for Boston College, they've had some injuries. I know one guy they're expected to get back this week is their left tackle, Ozzie. I hope I'm pronouncing this right. I'm sorry if I'm not. Trapilo. He was hurt for the last couple of weeks. He didn't play much against Virginia. He didn't play against Army at all. But their head coach Jeff Hafley said he hopes he's going to be back this week. Another guy that they've been missing for the past little bit. Wide receiver Ryan O'Keefe, who's a UCF transfer. He actually played against Georgia Tech last year down in Orlando. I don't know if he's going to play this weekend. There's not been a definitive statement there, but he's a really good playmaker. Like he's a very fast guy. He's very twitchy in the open field. He can make plays after the catch. Like he's a guy, if they get him back. Look, Boston College doesn't have a great passing game, but he is a guy that can add an element to it and can create a big play, which Miami hit a couple of big plays late. Ole Miss hit some big plays later in that game. So it's just one of those things as the game wears on, like they're going to run their quarterback a lot, and that's going to possibly allow receivers to bust some coverages and get open down the field at some point later in the game. So I do think if he's in there, that's something to monitor. But that's pretty much as far as the injury report goes. Look, there could be some late scratches we don't know about. College football programs, like this is not the NFL. They are not required to give a injury report. They're pretty much at liberty to do what they please in that area. So with college football injuries, you just need to take it with a grain of salt and just watch what happens on the field. And then we'll see that. But I expect Georgia Tech to be pretty healthy going into that game. And I guess let's start with the matchup of the offense versus Boston College's defense. We know Georgia Tech has a pretty good passing game. Like they're sixth in the ACC in yards per game right now, just in total offense, not just passing game, but total offense. Fourth in the ACC in passing yards per game at 275. And remember, they played in one fewer game than most teams have. Like that, they did have a bye week, so it's only 6 games. Some teams have played 7, so that's something to just know. They're ninth in the ACC in rushing yards per game, and it's really slowed these past couple weeks. And look, Miami has an excellent run defense. Like their run defense is very, very good, like top 20 in the country, probably good. But Georgia Tech wasn't able to run it on Bowling Green either, which is what gives me concern. And look, you're facing a Boston College defense that is 11th in the ACC in yards per game allowed and 11th in the ACC in rushing yards per allowed. Now, you have to look at their opponents and who they've played. They've played some pretty run-heavy teams. Look, I know Army they don't run the traditional more under the center option anymore, but they're still a run-heavy team. So you have to take that into account. Holy Cross, one of their FCS opponents, is a run-heavy team. So a lot of teams have been able to just get those yards just on volume alone. It hasn't necessarily been explosive plays. Now, I'm not trying to say Boston College has a good run defense because it's not great. I think you probably should take into account the volume of attempts that they've had to face. But you dive a little bit into the advanced stats on this, like their defensive success rate is 115th in the country, 113th against the pass, and 102nd against the run. Like that is a matchup that Buster Faulkner, Brent Key, they have to exploit. Like we've seen Georgia Tech have success against most defenses they've played. Now they're coming off their worst game of the year, but they've been able to find success against most of the teams they've played, and like they're going to throw the ball around a lot. And you know, when you're looking at 113th defensive success rate against the pass for Boston College, it seems to be pretty good. Like that's a matchup that you want to exploit and hit big plays down the field. Haynes King, like he is coming off probably the two worst games of the season for him so far. He was pretty dang good the first four games. Like there wasn't much to pick apart, but and this is starting in the Bowling Green game. He threw two bad interceptions in that one where he was just really forcing the ball down the field. And then he threw two picks against Miami where once again he was just trying to fit the ball where it really couldn't go. And I want to see if he's cleaned that up a little bit. Like, look, I've just talked about for the past 2.5 minutes that Boston College's pass defense isn't very good. But this is a chance to show, hey, this is back on track. I think, you know, getting Chase Lane will help in that area because he loved, you know, they have a connection, obviously, going back to Texas A&M. And I think that they obviously developed a good rapport those first couple of weeks, and it was unfortunate to see Lane go down. But I think that this is going to be an opportunity to hit some big plays because when you look at the numbers, like Boston College passing defense, you know, you might think it's pretty good. They're sixth in the ACC in pass yards allowed at 210 per game. But you got to do a little bit more deep diving because what did I just say a couple minutes ago? They have faced a lot of run-heavy football teams. Like they have faced two teams all season that have a passing attack with a pulse, and that's Florida State and Louisville. They actually did a decent job against Florida State. I think that when I went back and watched the game this week, honestly, I think it had more to do with Jordan Travis just missing guys, and they had a lot of drop passes in that game too, from what I remember. Louisville absolutely lit them up. Like I think Jack Plummer went 18 to 21, threw for like 388 and 5 touchdowns. And Louisville has one of the better passing attacks probably in the country. Georgia Tech is not terribly far behind. And I know that might be a bit hot takey, I guess, for some that don't follow this team closely, but like the passing attack for Georgia Tech has been pretty good. Like I think they have legitimate guys at receiver in Eric Singleton, Malik Rutherford, Dominic Blaylock. I expect them to possibly have a good game. Like this secondary can be had, and against the two better teams throwing the ball this year, they've not looked good. Virginia can't throw the ball. Army, obviously, they don't want to throw the ball. Like that's just not what they do. Holy Cross can't throw the football. Northern Illinois can't throw the football. So that's more than half the teams they played this year that just don't have a good enough passing attack to test them. So I'm anxious to see if Georgia Tech can really expose this Boston College secondary a lot like Louisville and Florida State did. I'm not here saying Haynes King's going to be throwing for 400 yards and 5 touchdowns necessarily, but I do think there are a lot of opportunities to be had against the secondary. And look, 100, like when you look at just the baseline statistics, it looks good. The advanced stats show a different story for the Boston College defense in the secondary, 113th in passing success rate allowed. Like that is what's going to be the big difference in the game, and especially when Georgia Tech has the ball. But I think one of the reasons that King has been forcing throws and everything is, one, the running game has just not been where they want it to be. Like I think he's had to put a lot of pressure on himself to try to go out and win these games throwing the ball. And a lot of it has to do with the running game just not clicking. Like I just said, they're ninth in the ACC in rushing yards per game, but they're, again, going up against a defense that's not very good at stopping anything. Like, you know, when they are against the run, like they 81st in success rate allowed against the run, Boston College is. Now, Georgia Tech's advanced stats in that area don't look very good either. Like they're 83rd in rushing success rate. They don't do a great job when running the ball. You know, EPA per rush ranked 55th. That's not great. and then just the success rate numbers are not very good. This is one of the players I want to watch this week is Jamal Haynes, because I think we've all seen his talent, and that guy plays as hard as anybody on the field. Like you saw it in the touchdown run against Miami. Like he really carried guys into the end zone, and he's not a big dude at all. Like he is a kind of a prototypical slot receiver, which is the position he used to play. He was just fighting and dragging guys into the end zone, and that really showed, what he can do as far as effort goes. But I want to see him get loose. Like I want to see him be able to make those cutbacks on those stretch zones that they were doing early in the year and be able to make guys miss. And that's something we just haven't seen. And that goes for Trey Cooley as well. He burst onto the scene against his former team, having 2 touchdowns, had a good game against South Carolina State, had actually a pretty decent game against Ole Miss. I think that he got a pretty good volume of carries in that game. But really the past 2 games, excuse me, he's been really quiet. And I wonder if he can really take some of that pressure off Jamal Haynes, and that Georgia Tech can get a good run game going. And we know that's the weakness of the offensive line has been the run blocking. Like you look at the PFF grades, and they're not great. And I do think that paints a realistic picture. They've been good in pass protection. Like Georgia Tech, outside of the Miami game, has been really good in pass protecting and not allowing sacks. And I think I believe they're going to do a good job in that this week. Like they've had to face some pretty good pass rushes over the past few weeks, excluding Bowling Green. And look, Bowling Green did get pressure. Like that needs to, people need to remember that. Like Bowling Green was able to get pressure, but Miami is a good pass rush, and they did have some success. But it wasn't like they sacked Haynes King 8 times. Wake Forest is a pretty good pass rush. They kept Haynes King clean most of that game. They kept him clean against Ole Miss, who actually has a pretty good defensive line. Their secondary is not the best, but I do think Ole Miss has a pretty good defensive line. So just overall, what I'm looking for on offense is just, can they expose that Boston College secondary? Louisville and Florida State did. They haven't faced many good passing attacks this year. I really think that those guys can be had. And it's just, can the running game get going again against a defense that is not very good at stopping the run? They're not like catastrophic, like they're not like 125th in the country or anything, but it's not hard to run on Boston College, and it would kind of give me some alarm bells if they can't do that, because I'm getting kind of close to that area with the running game anyway. Because look, not a lot of teams are going to run on Miami. I know North Carolina did last week, but not a lot of teams on the Miami schedule are going to run on them. But Bowling Green was able to stop the run against Georgia Tech, and that kind of gave me some cause for concern. And I just want to see maybe those put to rest this week. But success in the passing game, getting better in the run game, and keeping Haynes King clean. Look, that's a recipe for success against any team, but you're not facing a very good defense. And I think that those plays can be had. And I want to see this offense. It's being touted as one of the better ones in the ACC. They got to go out and show it this week, that they have the capability to do so, but they got to go out and show it. So, all right, let's get to the matchup that scares me. The defense, Georgia Tech's defense versus Boston College's offense. And I'll start by saying, like, it was a better defensive performance against Miami. Kevin Sherr taking over for Andrew Thacker. Like, he did add some wrinkles in there that confused Tyler Van Dyke, Miami's quarterback, into throwing 3 interceptions. But I will still say Georgia Tech still gave up a lot of yards. Like, they gave up over 450 yards. They gave up some explosive plays in the passing game, and they still let Miami run for 160. Now, I know Miami was running for a lot more leading up to that game, but they still had some yards allowed. And Tyler Van Dyke, he was playing really well going into that Georgia Tech game. He is not a high caliber NFL prospect, and Miami's coaching staff has to scheme things up for him a lot of the time, and he has to have guys open. And it's kind of been a theme for him for the past 3 seasons. If you do anything to confuse him or add new wrinkles in where he has to come off of his first read, he's going to make mistakes. So, and this is, I don't want to sound like I'm taking credit away from Kevin Sherr, because I think he did do a good job in adding some new wrinkles in. But it is something we've seen. If anybody's watched more than a few Miami games over the past few years, that's something you see from Van Dyke often. So I do want to see, okay, is that a thing with the defense? Are they really doing some new things and making life more difficult on the quarterbacks? Or is this just a Tyler Van Dyke thing where that Tech took away his first read, he couldn't come off of it and get to his second quick enough and just tried to force the ball, because a couple of those throws he made were just flat out atrocious, especially ones in the second half. So I want to see if they can continue that. Now, Boston College passing game is nowhere near as good at Miami as Miami's. Like, we talked about, they might be missing one of their better receivers in Ryan O'Keefe. It hasn't been said whether he's going to play or not. But one guy to watch in that game is Lewis Bond. He has 24 catches for 356 yards and 5 touchdowns. He's averaging nearly 15 yards per catch. He is the top guy that they're going to go to in that passing game. So Tech has to make sure that they contain him, because the other threats on that team they're not going to bust the game open. But Bond has the capability to really have a good game. But the passing game is not the part of Boston College's offense that scares me. It is the run defense, or the running game. And that goes back to Georgia Tech's rush defense. And look, nobody really needs to have any reminders. They are 12th in the ACC in points per game allowed, and they are dead last and by a very good margin in rushing yards per game allowed with 220. This is a bottom 10, bottom 15 run defense in the country. Now, they did a little bit better against Miami. I thought the run fits and the linebacker play was a lot better than what we've seen in recent weeks. But it's again, they're going to be challenged this week. Because, like, just let me read off some advanced stats for you. When Boston College is running the ball, plays per game, they're 10th total EPA when running the football. They're 11th, and EPA's expected points added. It's basically like, how good a job are you doing when you're running the ball? On a down-to-down basis, they're 48th in success rate. But EPA per game, they're number 7. EPA per play, they're number 13. Boston College can be very explosive in the running game, especially if you're not tackling well. And they did better against Miami. But again, you have to take the larger sample size of the season and say, all right, Georgia Tech hasn't been a great tackling team this year. And if they're not this week, Thomas Castellanos is going to make them pay, because, yes, I know he is a quarterback, but do you know he is the 4th leading rusher in the ACC with 500 yards, and he has 7 touchdowns? Like, he is a very, very skilled runner and explosive playmaker. And again, if you don't tackle well, we saw it against Ole Miss. Okay. Jackson Dart nearly ran for dang 200 yards. And Jackson Dart is not exactly known for his mobility. Like, he really was able to hurt Georgia Tech on the ground with some explosive runs. That's the only running quarterback really they faced this year that can really challenge them. Like, Jack Plummer can't run. Mitch Griffiths at Wake Forest can't run. Tyler Van Dyke dang sure can't run. And Bowling Green's quarterback can't run. Now, Bowling Green did some other things in that game, but I digress. So this is by far the best running quarterback they're going to play all year. That is just solely a runner. Like, they'll have to play Garrett Schrader at Syracuse later this year. He's a pretty solid runner, although they just kind of run him into the ground because that's all they can do on offense right now. But how they stop Castellanos and how they stop this designed running game for the quarterback for Boston College is just going to be so huge. Like, that could be where the game is won or lost. It really could be. But look, they are, again, 8th in EPA per rush, 3rd and 4th down success rate. They're 23rd. And you're going to, like, I don't know if y'all even want to hear these stats, but against the EPA against the rush, Georgia Tech's 119th. Early downs, EPA 125th. They're 128th in rushing success rate allowed. Like, it's pretty gross. And again, I'm hoping that with Kevin Sherr taking over, he did some good things in the Miami game. He's had a bye week to kind of just, come up with a game plan for Castellanos and Boston College. Stopping him is the entire key to this thing, because it's not just in the running game. If they allow him to just run all over them, like I alluded to earlier, they can hit some explosive plays later in the game, because when they start having success running the ball, you're going to have to bring more guys into the box, whether that's LaMiles Brooks at safety. You're going to have to creep them down a little bit. And look, Boston College doesn't have NFL wide receivers. They have some explosive guys like Bond and O'Keefe that if they can get behind them because Georgia Tech has to play more up, they're going to expose that. That is so stopping Castellanos and forcing them into third and longs is just going to be super, super key in this game. And I don't know if they can do it. They have to go show it because again, Jackson Dart's the only quarterback they've played this year that can run, and he ran for 200 yards. And again, nobody is saying Jackson Dart's a big time dual threat, but he can run it, and he did very successfully in that game against Tech when they went to Oxford and played Ole Miss. Castellanos is a different deal. Like he is a very legitimate running threat. So stopping him and containing him, tackling well in space is just going to be big. Like Boston College wants to run the football, and they're going to do it early and often. I also wouldn't be surprised if they come out in some formations early that would indicate to run the football and maybe doing play action to try to hit a deep shot early just to keep Tech honest. A lot of teams like to take deep shots early in the game to try to get you off balance. I think you might see something like that this weekend. So, again, tackling, stopping the run, that's to me like the key to the game. Because if they do that, I really think that this game is going to be won by Tech. But if they can't, it's going to be tough because that's going to allow Boston College to open things up on offense. When they have to throw the football and you know they're going to throw the football, I don't think they can. When they're running the football well and they can add elements of play action and misdirection, that's where they're dangerous. Like that's going to be the key here. It's just stopping the run. That is the entire focus for me on the defensive side for Georgia Tech. We'll get into some players to watch. I think I alluded to him. I talked about him earlier. Like Jamal Haynes is one guy to watch this week. He is very capable of being a very good running back. He's shown it this year. I just want to see the ground attack get back to playing how it did earlier in the season. Like they hit some big runs against Louisville. They had some success against Ole Miss. They just haven't been able to hit those explosive plays in recent weeks. Really the past 3 games. Like I didn't even mention Wake Forest. Like they did a little bit better against Wake Forest than they have against Bowling Green and Miami. But they got a chunk of yards on like the last drive of the game where Jamal Haynes did rip a big run and it was like 30, 35 yards and was able to get that. So I'm watching him in this game. And then I feel like I repeat myself every week talking about this team in the previews is like the linebackers, whether it's Paul Moala, Trinelius Tatum, Kyle Eford, like those guys, their run fits, how they tackle. Boston College is just going to throw a lot at them in terms of run scheme and how they're going to run the quarterback. They've got to be disciplined. They have to tackle well. They have to fit the run well. Those are the guys to watch. And it's really the entire front seven as well. Like the defensive line for Georgia Tech has got to be able to do a good job of getting in the backfield, creating some havoc. Boston College's offensive line is okay. Like I said earlier, their left tackle's been banged up, so that could be a potential weakness for them. But how they're able to stop the run, I think the linebackers and the front seven are just going to be super, super key to that. Some guys to watch on Boston College. Look, I've mentioned their team just revolves around Castellanos and his ability to create plays. He threw for nearly 300 yards and rushed for over 100 on Florida State. He had an excellent game there. He had a big game against Army and Virginia. Like when he plays well, this offense can really move the ball well, and they do become a difficult team to defend. That's what it kind of revolves around. Lewis Bond's the other guy you need to watch because if O'Keefe doesn't play, he is really the only guy that can make plays on the outside for them, whether it's a deep shot, whether it's just any kind of passing situation. He is the go-to guy there. But if O'Keefe does come back, that helps open things up for him just because of O'Keefe's ability to stretch the field with his speed. So I think Lewis Bond's another guy. And then defensively, Vinny DePalma is probably their top defensive player. He has 49 tackles this year. He is kind of their lone bright spot. They don't rush the passer particularly well. We talked about how I think their secondary is probably not as good as some numbers might suggest. So, but he is a guy to watch on the defensive side, just especially when Georgia Tech tries to get the ground game going. Like he is a guy that can stop it. So we'll see if Georgia Tech can just get to the second level, get blocks down, and stop him. X factors. Look, again, I'm not gonna repeat everything I've said, but I do think I've been pretty clear that stopping the run and stopping Castellanos is the entire key to stopping that offense. Because again, you stop him, force him into obvious passing situations. They don't do as good of a job. Like they don't. Their success rate when throwing the football is 120th in the country. It's just not there. That you got to stop them on early downs and force them into obvious passing situations. And even still, when you do that, you have to play contain and be able to make sure that he doesn't bust big plays, because that's going to be the entire thing of stopping their offense, is just stopping him. So being able to stop the run, creating explosive plays in the passing game or running game, or just on offense in general, excuse me. So Boston College as a team, I think it's tough for them to play from behind because of their limitations throwing the football. And look, I know that Virginia got up to a big lead on them and Boston College came back. Virginia's terrible. Like they're the worst team in the ACC, and I don't think you can count on that. They're worse than Georgia Tech in just about every category possible. Creating explosive plays, because it's something that Georgia Tech has done earlier in the season, but they've also not been able to do the past few games outside of the very beginning of the Bowling Green game. After that, they really just couldn't get anything going. And again, until Miami just broke down in every way possible at the end of that game, they couldn't hit anything in that game. So being able to consistently hit big plays and just having down-to-down success on offense, I think it's going to be super key. Keeping Castellanos off the field and limiting his ability to create big plays and take over the game. So as far as predictions goes, I've gone at the beginning of the season. I felt pretty comfortable picking Georgia Tech to win this game. The spread right now is 4.5. The over/under, I believe, is at 58. One prediction I'm confident in is I would take that over. If it's still hovering around that number, I do think both of these teams are going to score on each other. And I wrote earlier this week that Tech's biggest challenge this week may not have anything to do with defending Castellanos or anything schematic on the field. It's just playing as a favorite in general. Look, Brent Key has a pretty good reputation of playing well as an underdog, especially as a big underdog. I mean, he was a 3-touchdown underdog against Pitt, won that game outright. 3-touchdown underdog against North Carolina, won that game outright. Won the game against Miami outright as a 20-point dog. They covered against Georgia last year when they had a big spread against them. Like in those situations, outside of the Florida State game last year where they did get blown out, he's done pretty well. One area where they haven't done well is play as a favorite. And again, they've only been a favorite 4 times, so this is not a large sample size. So this isn't anything definitive. But go back to last year, they beat Pitt, they beat Duke. The vibes are pretty good. They come in as a favorite on a Thursday night game and lose just an ugly game to Virginia. Like every Tech fan remembers that game. Same thing. They beat Virginia Tech, go on the road, beat Virginia Tech. Zach Pyron scores that touchdown near the end of the game. They come home, they're favorites against an awful Miami team that had only won 4 games and was just playing terribly at that point. And they lost as a favorite, and they lost by 3 touchdowns. Zach Pyron did get injured in that game, but my point remains. South Carolina State, they were favored, and they won. That's the only game that Kia has won as a favorite. And then the other game was Bowling Green. They lost that game. So they've lost 3 games outright as a favorite, and they haven't covered any of the 4 games he's been a favorite. Just in general, Tech has had a tough time defending running quarterbacks going back for as long as I can remember. Like they've just had a really tough time defending running quarterbacks. And those are things that give me pause a little bit, because I do wonder if there is an element to this team to where they don't play well as a favorite. Now, Boston College, you shouldn't overlook them because like they're 3-3. They gave Florida, like you have proof, like they gave Florida State a really good game. There were some different elements to that, but they did give them a good game. They also got blown out by Louisville, so there's some ups and downs with that team as well. But they can't overlook Boston College the way they did Bowling Green, and I don't think they will because it's an ACC opponent. Tech is 2-1 in the ACC. This would move you to 3-1 in the ACC with a big game against North Carolina next week. But those elements give me pause and just saying this is just going to be an easy game for Georgia Tech, because I don't think it is. Now, I think they win. I don't think they cover. Like I think they win by like 2 points, 2 or 3 points. I'm thinking 33 to 31, 33 to 30, or something along those lines. Hitting the over in this game. I need to see more proof with Kevin Sherr as defensive coordinator that they really can stop the run and that they've gotten a lot better in that area, stopping the run. Because again, Miami still had success, and look at the underlying numbers, it still doesn't paint a good picture, even though they forced the turnovers, and that'll be a key aspect of this game is whether they can get Castellanos to turn the ball over. But I think he is going to have some success in the running game. But I think Tech can expose their secondary enough to where they can win this game. I think it's going to come down to which team can get a stop blast, and I think Tech can. I don't feel confident in this prediction because this is just we've seen when Georgia Tech is favored, when things seem to be trending in the right direction, things go the opposite way. They have to buck that trend. I think they get a win Saturday, but I'm shaky about my prediction there. Like it's they have to go out and get it and earn it, and we'll see if they can do that. So that's going to do it for me today on the All Yellow Jackets show. Come out to Bobby Dodd this Saturday. It's going to be hopefully a fun game. It's one Tech needs to win, and hope to see a lot of Tech fans out there. Fill up the stadium, come out, support the team. I will be back with I'll try to do more of an instant reaction show after the game Saturday, just kind of giving just my rapid fire thoughts after that. So I'll try to get something up then. But I appreciate anybody that's tuning into the show. It means a lot to me. I appreciate anybody that reads the content on All Yellow Jackets. Appreciate the support. It does mean a lot to me. So again, if you're watching on YouTube, would really love like the video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And if you have, hit that notification bell to know when new content goes up. If you're listening on podcast form, 1-star, 3-star, 5-star review, doesn't matter to me. I want to know what you guys think. This content's for you guys. I want to know what everybody thinks about it, and just let me know what I can do to improve the show, because that's what it's all about. So I will be back after Saturday, and I will see you guys then. Thank you.